This lab is called Capillary Density and Muscle Fiber Type. So I'm going to kind of just read this to you and give you some information that is going to help you a lot with the lab so that you're in and out relatively quickly. We've had a bunch of tests lately and kind of more involved labs. So this one, I meant it to be fairly straightforward and easy. So first off, let's talk about what capillary density even is. So it's a physiological measure that takes a cross section of a muscle and counts the number of capillaries contained within that certain area. And it's expressed in capillaries per millimeter squared. So, just counting the capillaries in a certain area of muscle. So you would actually like take out someone's muscle. We're not going to do this in lab, but you would take a muscle biopsy and stain it for like a protein that would be in a capillary, and then you would just count how many would be within a couple millimeters. Another thing, if you don't know, a capillary is a blood vessel where nutrients and oxygen are delivered to a tissue and where waste products are taken away from that same tissue. So in our case, skeletal muscle is what we're really interested in. Um, Here we can get nutrients in. Think about glucose, sodium, water, oxygen, really anything that a muscle could possibly need. And waste out, think things like hydrogen ions, lactate, phosphates, anything that might inhibit a muscle from contracting many times. So, hopefully, this makes sense that capillaries are fairly important for endurance activities and repeated bout activities. Um, so, really, the amount of oxygen and glucose or other nutrients that we can get into a muscle, that's going to more or less dictate how long we can keep on doing it. And another interesting thing, I wrote this right about here. The more capillaries that we have, the better a muscle can recover. So, say you're doing 3 sets of 10 on a squat or something, and you have to rest at least 2 minutes in between each to like maintain your performance. If you have a greater capillary density, maybe you only have to rest 90 seconds or maybe just a minute. So you can get waste products out, nutrients in, all of that. Fairly important for all sorts of performance. Another thing that we're going to be measuring today, and all of this is with the exact same protocol. So I'm trying to measure many things at once. We're going to be measuring the skeletal muscle fiber type. So generally, there are two different types of muscle. So slow twitch and fast twitch. So type 1 is slow twitch, and type 2A and 2X are fast twitch. There are more, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in class. But something I wanted to point out here, for a long time, we figured, and this is likely still the case, that a muscle fiber type was dictated by the motor neuron that was innervating it. So, like the part of the peripheral nervous system innervating or like making that muscle contract, that really dictated what the muscle fiber type was. But it seems like we can have some fiber type shifts. So, I'd like you to think more of muscle fiber types on a spectrum. So, really slow, a little bit faster, a little bit faster, a little bit faster, a little bit faster. And there's some recent work coming out of California. The guy doesn't know I'm talking about him, so he's not going to know that I'm not referring to his name. But one stretch of a muscle fiber actually might have different, like muscle fiber types within it, or to where it would be a hybrid muscle fiber. So, one thing to understand here is how muscle fiber types are actually like dictated and measured in like a laboratory setting. And I'll talk about this in class. It's really the type of enzyme inside of this myosin head, the myosin ATPase. So there's a slow flavor and faster flavors. So we might be able to have a hybrid like this. So here's actin, here's myosin, here's where the myosin heads are, so that's where the myosin ATPase is going to be. We might have a type 1 myosin ATPase here to break down that ATP, and we might have a type 2A myosin ATPase here to break down that ATP. So then we would call this a type 1/2A fiber, so it would be a hybrid fiber. But just for purposes of this class and your current understanding, this is really what I want you to know and be aware of. Just characteristics of different skeletal muscle fiber types. So the number of mitochondria in type 2X, or our fastest fast twitch, fairly low. It's kind of moderate in the type 2A, so that's our kind of like medium fiber, if you will. It's a little bit closer to type 2X, but I'll draw out some stuff in class and I'll make this more clear. Type 1 fibers, a lot more mitochondria, um, more resistant to fatigue. Type 1 fibers, here moderate, here low, predominant energy source. So type 2X, mostly anaerobic, so the creatine phosphate system and also anaerobic glycolysis. Over on this end, aerobic, so oxidative phosphorylation for type 1. Type 2A, kind of in the middle, a little bit more towards like anaerobic glycolysis and things like that, though. There's a couple of other things here like ATPase activity, how quick this enzyme actually catalyzes that reaction of ATP to ADP and PI. Vmax, the shortening of like a sarcomere, so how quickly this actin is pulled across. Fast twitch fibers do it a little bit faster, slow twitch fibers a little bit slower, and truthfully, it's not that different, but it's a little bit, it's different enough. So there's some information to know about that. But for lab today, what we're going to do, chose, come on, get it together. Sorry. So choose one individual in your group who will like test today. So only one person in each group is actually going to be lifting some weights. You need to pick from one of these three different movements, and it needs to be something with a clear like eccentric and concentric component. So a squat, a bench press, a curl, whatever we want to do. And keep in mind we'll be sharing, so um, uh, just bear that in mind whenever who's going up, so that like weights could be similar, or I mean they don't have to be. We can rack and unrack weights. That's not a big deal. Um, One big thing, you will need to know what their 1 rep max is. So I assume most of you don't know what your 1 repetition max curl is. So there, if you do, we can use it, but you likely won't. But many of you, hopefully, you know what your 1 repetition max squat and bench press are. So you need to know that. Warm up for a little bit. Take at least 3 minutes of rest between the warm-ups and the actual testing. So what we're going to do, 70% of your 1 repetition max, and you're just going to lift it as many times as you possibly can. And from that, we can predict what your capillary density is and also what your percent type 1 fibers are, or what percentage that it is. Now, this I'm only going to give you in the video. I'm not going to talk about this in class. So hopefully this helps. I found this paper a little while ago. It was 2008 and it was out of Athens, Greece, so some good research. What they did, they actually measured muscle fiber type and capillary density for individuals lifting. Let's see, it was 70% of your 1 rep max and 85% of your 1 rep max. The 85% didn't turn out as well as the 70% did, and they found a little bit of a relationship to type 1 muscle fiber, and also to this one's the really good one, to capillary density. So capillaries, per millimeter squared. And Here are the equations that I want you to know. So for measuring capillary density, what I did, I just re-entered in all of their data um, on that paper. So I literally just like got out a ruler, measured all of this stuff, figured out that it was like, okay, that looks like 11 reps and about a 310 capillary density. So here's what I want you to know. This equation, y equals mx plus b, where x is the number of reps, y is the capillary density. So have this equation, 6.594 x plus 241.76. And from the amount of reps that the person in your group does, we should be able to predict what their capillary density is. Kind of around average scores, it seems like somewhere between like 250 and 500 would be approximately normal for this. Um, Next thing over here, equation for type 1 muscle fibers. So I did the same thing. They did 18 reps, about 18% type 1 muscle fibers, and so on and so forth. So here's the equation I want you to know for that. 0.9332 x plus 32.952. So here x, that is number of repetitions, and then y, that should give you the percent type 1 fiber. Or like how much slow twitch fibers that they have. Now this isn't super exact, um, but it should get us in the ballpark. Next thing over here. Another thing to keep in mind, this is somewhat like site specific. So if you're doing a squat, we're looking at the capillary density and the muscle fiber type mostly in your legs. There's a little bit of synergist and stabilizer muscles going on here, but mostly quadriceps and glutes. For bench press, that's mostly going to be pecs, anterior deltoid, and triceps. So if we did a bench press test on somebody, by no means does that say that the percent type 1 fibers that we get there is going to be indicative of the percent type 1 fibers in their legs. It actually can somewhat go all over the place there. So that's something to keep in mind. Um, uh, but back to the procedures, 70%. Use those equations to predict percent type 1. And, like type 1 and type 2, that's 100%. So just do a little bit of subtraction right there. Write the numbers of completed. Tell me their capillary density. And filling all this out should be fairly quick. And then answer this question. What type of sports do you think this individual would excel at and why? So, based upon the capillary density and their percent fiber type, you should be able to tell me some stuff with that. Perfect. That is the video. See you in class.